to say, before I talk about this training, I want to say, I know there have been many of you that have contacted us about the getting credit for watching the recordings for the ethics and suicide prevention ones. And we did an ethics one. And so if you've watched the recording and that link in the guidelines wasn't working, and we realized that, we've been trying to do it a different way, so it's taken a little longer to set it up. I will be sending an email out. We've got that set up now, but I'll be sending an email out to all of you on the email list and let you know how to go about getting that that survey and getting credit for. But remember, it's only for the ethics and the suicide prevention recordings that you can get credit for. So just watch for that email. It'll be separate and specific to that, and we'll let you know how to get in and get that credit. Okay. Today's code word. Thanks, Adriana. She's sending a warm hug. I love that. Today's code word is identity. I thought that would be very appropriate for the subject that we're talking about today. So if you lose connection, we will be letting people in until 10:15 when we close the meeting. So if you lose connection after that and you want to be readmitted, please email Gabby. Okay, I will put that in the chat. Don't email me because I miss those, and it may be, if I see it at all, it may be a while before you get back in. So, and I would just forward it to Gabby anyway. So please email Gabby that code word identity, and she'll get you readmitted. If you have a name, when your Zoom name, if it's like iPad or a phone number or whatever, please let her know, because she won't know who you are if you if you don't specifically tell her. That's a little confusing sometimes. So okay, let's get going. I'm so excited. I have to say, this came about because I was at UVU and Ben was presenting, and I had to leave. I only caught like the first 10 to 15 minutes of his presentation, and I had to leave for another meeting. And I was just so sad because I was really into it. And it's like, okay, we've got to bring him on. So this is for me. I mean, you all can watch and everything, but this is for me.
I'm happy to be here to give you the other 50 minutes, Kelly.
I really appreciate that. But so this has been really fun to get set up. We've been so excited about it. But I want to introduce you to our presenter. This is Ben Schilaty, and he is a professor of social work at UVU. And he's consented to come and teach us today on just some amazing things. And so this is a subject I think we're all really, wanting to learn more about. And we all need to know better how to work with different populations and different people, and just, do our very best in embracing, differences and similarities. And so I think this is going to be really fun for everybody. So I'm going to turn the time over to Ben, and yeah, take it away. Go for it.
All right. Well, it is such a pleasure to be with you all today. I see neighbors of mine on here. I see former colleagues when I was doing my MSW, current colleagues, a former boss of mine. And I also want you to know that I'm teaching an intro to social work class right now, and my students are attending this presentation as well. I'm so excited to see them. Some of them future social workers, all of them amazing community members, and just so thrilled to have so many wonderful people on here. So I will do my best to teach you all something hopefully helpful. So I will go ahead and start sharing my presentation. Let's see here. Okay. All right. One thing that's difficult about presenting on Zoom is I don't get to hear you laugh. So if you are prone to laughter, feel free to unmute yourself so that I can hear you laugh and get feedback for that. Is my screen sharing going okay? Am I sharing the right screen?
It is. It's not in presentation mode. It's in,
Okay, let me try
we could
this.
do a laugh track for you, Ben, if you want to do
Actually, I love a good laugh track.
that.
So here, I'll just put this on my other screen. And yes, this will work so good. Okay. And we practiced this beforehand. Okay. Here we go.
There
Great.
we go. That's
All
great.
right. All right. So Today I'm going to be talking about working with LGBTQ clients through the lens of identity development, and there are lots of ways to work with LGBTQ clients, and I just wanted to focus on this one specific topic of identity development and what different clients need at different stages of their identity development. Like Kelly said, I work primarily as a social work professor at Utah Valley University. But I also work on the and moonlight as a therapist working with LGBTQ clients. So I'll be sharing some stories of some of my clients and things that have happened with them and the needs they've had and how I've worked to meet them. So I want to start out with this quote from Brian Stevenson. So this is something he said during a forum at Brigham Young University a few years ago. He said, "Our power is waiting for us if we get proximate. We have to get closer to those places where people are suffering if we're going to change the world." And I remember watching this presentation live as a student at BYU and just like feeling the power of this and feeling that I needed to understand people's stories better if I was going to make the world a better place. And immediately after I watched this forum, I went to one of my social work classes, and I was the first person to get there. And a student walked in right after me, and she had mentioned in passing that she was a dreamer, that she had come to the US undocumented. And I knew what that meant, intellectually, but I hadn't really talked to any dreamers before. And so having just heard this quote, I said, "Hey, I remember that you mentioned that you're a dreamer. Could you just tell me a little bit about what that's been like?" And so for the 10 minutes before class started, she just told me all these stories. She talked about coming to the US as a baby, and she had never even been to Mexico. Like she had no memories of Mexico. And she didn't even know that she was undocumented until she wanted to get a driver's license, and her mom said that she couldn't. And like my heart just like expanded so much just hearing that story. Then we had class for 2 hours. And then when class was over, she came up to me and she said, "Ben, you're the only person besides my family and my husband who's ever heard any of this. So thank you for asking." And so when we are talking to people who have stories that are untold, it can be so empowering for them to have someone witness that story and hear that story. And building off of that, I love this quote from Maya Angelou. She said, "There's no greater agony than bearing an untold story inside of you." And as social workers, we get to be the people to, bear witness to these stories, to know things that maybe no one else knows about them. We're the people where, we get to hear them say, "I've never shared this with anyone before, but," and then they share something that they've never got to share before, and that can be a really powerful thing. I'm going to be asking some questions throughout the presentation. So feel free to raise your hand or put something in the chat. Kelly's going to be watching the chat for us for questions. And I will be asking for some participation as well. And yeah, so and once again, I haven't heard any laughter yet, but maybe I just haven't been funny yet. So we'll see, we'll see if that happens later. All right, so I am a gay person. I am 41 years old. I'm very open and public about my experiences. But before that happened, I was not a 41-year-old who was open with my experiences and comfortable with what was going on in my life. So when I was 23 years old, I was an undergraduate student at Brigham Young University, and I'd been noticing, these feelings, these attractions, my orientation for a long time, and I was doing everything I could to try and change it. I was praying about it. I had gone to therapy to change my orientation. And I was just trying to do all these things and nothing was working. And so I had all these things I wanted to explore and all these things I wanted to talk about, and there was no one I could talk to about them. And I'm a big journaler. I wanted to just kind of journal about my things because that helps me figure out how I feel about things. But I couldn't journal about my experiences in my journal because someday my kids and grandkids would read that, and I didn't want them to know that their father and grandfather was secretly gay. And so I created a secret journal that was only for me, just to process my experiences that I was never going to share with anyone. And I'm going to share that with you today. So these are my unfiltered thoughts as a 23-year-old, dealing internally with my sexual orientation. So my journal only has 11 entries in it, and these are some lines from the very first entry. So I wrote, "Since I was a teenager, I have struggled with same-gender attraction. This is the first time I've ever admitted that fact, except in prayer." And that was such a big deal for me to actually write down the words, made it feel real. and I didn't want it to feel real. I didn't want this to be the reality of my life. And so writing those words down was really scary. Now, at the time, I had found a few anonymous blogs of other gay BYU students, and some of them had years of history. And when I found these, I was so excited. I was like, "Oh my gosh, I am not alone. There are other people like me." And I would start with like their very first post, and then read all the posts. And many of them had dozens of posts over a couple of years. And almost all of them started out by saying, I'm a Latter-day Saint. I'm a BYU student and I'm going to stay active in the church. Then almost all of them ended up, by the end, leaving the church. And that was such a scary proposition to me. And so, with that in mind, I wrote, I will not let that happen to me. I must keep myself worthy at all costs, but it's so hard. And you can see here that this fear I had of worthiness, this fear I wanted to be good enough. And I didn't want to do anything that would take me outside of this community that meant so much to me. And then that same first entry I wrote, I'm scared I'll have to admit my same gender attraction to my family. I know they'd still love me and support me, but I know that it'd be hard for them to deal with. I'd rather go through this alone than hurt my parents. I just want to make them happy. And you can see here, once again, these are my unfiltered thoughts that I was afraid that if I told anyone about what was going on in my life, I was going to be a burden to them. And there was this real sense of by telling you that I am gay, by telling you that I experience same-sex attraction, I'm going to be placing a burden on you. And so imagine, this feeling of being a burden. All right, and another entry I wrote on Sunday school, or on Sunday, I was really excited because a girl taught Sunday school that I usually don't find pretty, but she looked super pretty that day. It gave me a lot of hope. It felt like things were improving. Then that night, I went to my friend's house and her roommate's boyfriend was there. He's really handsome, and I was almost sickened with myself for thinking so. He was almost too good looking. And I remember that guy, he was incredibly handsome. Um, and then later on in the entry, I wrote, "What is the reason for this trial? I know that someday will end, and I pray that God will hasten the day." So what you can see here, in these words I'm sharing, is that if I thought a woman was at all attractive or at all appealing, I was winning, that was good. And if I thought a guy was attractive, that was bad and that was wrong, and I was shaming myself for thinking so. I used to have a ring that my mom gave me when I was a teenager that said "Return with honor" on it. And whenever I thought a guy was attractive, I would twirl that ring with my finger and I would like hum a hymn in my head to try and like not think that the guy was attractive. And that did nothing to change my orientation, but it did lead to me feeling a lot of shame for ever thinking that a guy was attractive. And then in this last part where I say, "What is the reason for this trial?" I that was the lens I viewed this through. This was a problem. This was something I needed to like work my way through. And I had been taught very explicitly by some of the leaders of my church that same-sex attraction was a trial, a temptation, and an affliction that existed in this life that wouldn't exist in the next life. And I was so filled with shame, so filled with self-hatred that I would have rather been dead and straight instead of alive and gay. And so if I had been diagnosed with a terminal illness at this time, I would have been thrilled. I would have thought, okay, I can die a hero. I don't have to deal with this anymore, and I can just move on. And so I experienced, years of what we might call passive suicidal ideation. I was never actively suicidal. I never had a plan or actually considered taking my life. But there were a lot of years where I thought if I could die, I think my life would be like I'd be better off, and the people around me would be better off. And I have a picture of me from this time, back when my hair was brown. And this is 23-year-old me, and I have this picture here because this is what it looks like when someone is struggling internally with their sexual orientation. Sometimes it's really hard to tell what's going on in someone's life. And this picture was taken like at the time I was working on the secret journal. Like all these thoughts I wrote down are in this person's head who looks just so happy and carefree and has a tie that I still have, and sometimes still wear. Ties don't often go out of fashion. All right. And then I'll just share one last quote from my secret journal. So I wrote, "I've wanted to tell my roommate Craig about my same-sex attraction, but I don't know if that would be a good idea. Would I find a good support system or lose a friend?" All right. And here you can see very clearly there was this fear I was holding on that if I told people that my relationships were going to change. Now, Craig ended up becoming the first person that I came out to. I was on a walk with him and my best friend from high school, Mitch, just a few blocks east of BYU in Kiwanis Park. And I'd been wanting to tell people for months that I experienced same-sex attraction. And we were on this walk, and this feeling just like bubbled up inside me. Like, I need to tell them right now, which was so terrifying. And I pushed that feeling down and pushed that feeling down. And as I thought about the reality of like expressing this to them, I felt physically ill. Like I thought I might actually throw up. Like I was physically ill at the thought of telling them that I experienced same-sex attraction. But the feeling just wouldn't go away. So I asked them if we could sit down on the grass. And so we're sitting on the grass in this park, and I'm hemming and hawing for a few minutes, and I finally say a line that I had stolen from one of those anonymous blogs I had read. And I said, "For as long as I can remember, I've been more attracted to men than women." And that was such an easier thing for me to say than to use an identity label, to say that I was gay, or even to say that I experienced same-sex attraction. But to say for as long as I can remember, I've been more attracted to men than women. And which honestly isn't even a true statement. Well, I mean, it is true, but there's implied that I was attracted to women. And so I said this thing like so scared. And then they both responded with love and kindness. And I remember my friend Mitch, my friend from high school, asking some good questions and trying to understand the situation. But Craig was my roommate, and we shared a bedroom with each other, and he wasn't saying very much. And so I was very concerned about what he was thinking. So I finally verbalized this fear that I'd had for months. And I said, "Craig, I understand if you don't want to be my roommate anymore." And he kind of got this like shocked look on his face. He said, "Why wouldn't I want to be your roommate? You're the same person you've always been." And that was the beginning of my healing, where I could share this thing to me that felt so crazy, felt so yucky and undesirable. And my friends just said, "We see you the same." And I wrote a book a few years ago about my experiences, being a gay Latter-day Saint. And the book is called A Walk in My Shoes. And I dedicated my book to Mitch and Craig because they were the first people that I invited to walk in my shoes. And I remember when I gave a copy of my book to Mitch, and I showed him that, he said, "Ben, this is too much." And I said, "No, it is not. You have no idea how your kind reaction that day shaped my life for the better." And I want to memorialize that by dedicating my book to you and Craig. So I just want you to understand that like if you were one of the first people that someone discloses their orientation or their gender identity to, this can be a very a tender time, a very special time, and something that will be remembered for years. When Mitch and Craig and I went on that walk back in 2007, we had no idea that I was going to tell thousands of people that story. And they weren't, preparing for this moment. Like, I wonder what I'll do if Ben comes out. Like that was not on their minds, but they cared about me, and they did the right thing just because they really loved me. And there were lots of years of education after for all three of us. But these moments are moments that will be remembered. All right. So we're going to talk about CASA's stages of identity development. This is a model that was developed back in the 70s in Australia. There are lots of identity models when it comes to LGBTQ identity formation. And this is the one that I like the most, just because it fits my life so well. It fits the lives of so many of my clients. And that's why I want to share it with you. Now, of course, when it comes to any identity model, no one's ever in one discrete stage and then the next discrete stage and then the next stage. But there's a lot of movement back and forth. There's a lot of overlap. And of course, no one's experience is going to be exactly the same. And there might be someone who has a completely different experience. And that is totally normal and totally okay. These are just general trends that I see that is shown in the research that often happens as someone goes through understanding their LGBTQ identity and what that identity formation looks like. All right, so we'll start with stage one. Stage one is called identity confusion. And this is when feelings of same gender attraction or gender incongruence are unacceptable. So I would call this phase is really highlighted with denial. Like this isn't real, this isn't happening. Just doing any like doing all the mental gymnastics to not believe that this is happening. And this is when someone will honestly identify as heterosexual or cisgender. Now, I was asked a number of times throughout my life if I was gay because I was bad at sports and I liked the Golden Girls, and I always said no. And to me, like that wasn't lying. Like I was telling the truth. And to me, like, it really did not feel like lying. Like, no, I'm not gay. Like how could I be? Like, this can't be a reality. And this is when people will be looking for assurances that they aren't LGBTQ plus. Like my experience with that woman in my ward at church who was teaching Sunday school, who I thought was pretty. So we'll be looking for all these assurances, like, okay, well, this thing happened, so maybe I'm not gay. People will be seeking information online. They'll be open to learning, like me reading those anonymous blogs. There's a joke among LGBTQ people after that, like how many BuzzFeed quizzes did you take that were like, "Am I gay?" Because that's a very common thing. Like, well, am I gay? Am I trans? And people will pursue a heterosexual relationship or cisgender presentation during this time. So this is the stage of this isn't real, this isn't happening, my life is going to be normal. Now, when I've had clients in this phase, and it's very uncommon to have clients who are this very early stage one of identity confusion because they're just not ready to talk about it. So they might come in for another reason, and then this topic starts to bubble up. I had a client who came in to see me because she was struggling with her faith and wanted to talk about her faith. And then as we were talking, she was referring to herself, and she didn't use the pronoun she or her, but she just said it, referring to herself. And I noticed that, and I tried to be as curious as possible. I said, I noticed you used it to describe yourself. And then she got really quiet and she said, I'm not sure I've ever really felt like I was a woman, and I haven't really felt like a man either. I just feel like this gross creature, and I think that it describes me the best. And like, what a painful thing for her to share with me. And then I said, well, can you tell me more about that? And I got her talking and sharing, and then this moved us into the phase of her starting to talk about, I've never really felt like I fit into this gender binary. But along with that was a lot of trauma from her home life growing up, both mental and emotional and physical abuse in her home that led her to believe that she was just like this gross, awful person that was really bad. And she's told me in later sessions that that moment of this accidental disclosure led to a lot of good talks and healing as we talk about not just her gender identity but also her orientation. So some considerations for you all. I'm going to ask you questions, so get ready to share some thoughts. Is that you're unlikely to be part of this person's journey. You are unlikely to know that they are Googling, "Am I gay?" You are unlikely to know that they are having feelings or experiences that they find unacceptable. They might not be talking about this at all. So my question for you all is, what messages are you sending? If you're going to have no idea that someone is experiencing this stage of identity confusion, how can you send messages that you're a safe person to talk to and a safe person for them to come out to? What do you think? And you're welcome to unmute yourself and share a thought.
Yeah, this is Drew up in Cache Valley, and I know my wife and I have had some HOAs get upset with us in the past, but we try to have a rainbow flag somewhere on our home to signify that we're a safe space for people to approach.
That's wonderful. And Drew, tell us a little more about, what message that would send.
Well, living in Cache Valley, we're usually the only ones in the neighborhood with a flag up, and it really helps our community find us. My wife and I run a ex-Mormon support group every Sunday. And so when people are trying to find us for other activities related to that, whether it's a D&D night or if they're coming over for support, I like to call my wife our heathen priesthood leader because we have a truck. So everyone comes to us when we're getting ready to move.
Okay. Yeah, but I love that. It signals, hey, we're people that love LGBTQ people. That's wonderful. Great. What are the thoughts about about how you could send messages that you're a safe person to talk to?
Hey Ben, this is Carmen Welch. I just think it's just the way words matter, and just the way you speak in general to people, with kindness and respect, um, and just watch, just with kindness and respect. And I think we all need to uh, speak that way. I don't know.
Yeah. Carmen, what you just shared is so important. As a closeted gay person, and even still now, I had a mental filing cabinet of all the things that people in my life had said about LGBTQ people. And I knew who I could talk to and who I couldn't based on the things that people had said. Yeah, go ahead, Carmen.
Exactly.
Yeah. And so I came out publicly when I was 30, so just about 11 years ago. And there were a number of people that I felt like needed to hear it from me before I came out publicly and just like told the whole world. And so I had like a list of people I was going to tell. The last person I told was one of my friends from high school who, when we were 17, had made a really homophobic joke. And I remembered that. And, 13 years later, that joke was still in my head, of, okay, this is someone that I'm not sure I can tell.
Hmm. Yeah.
And on the flip side, my neighbor, I'm from the Seattle area. My next door neighbor growing up, and she still lives next door to my parents' house. She's gay, and her name is Karen, which was a name that was okay to have back then. And I remember hearing the way that my parents talked about Karen and her girlfriends, and the ways that they treated her and were kind to her. And I remember before I came out to them, I thought, if if my parents are that kind to Karen, they're at least going to be that kind to me.
Mhm. Yeah.
And
Excellent.
so, however it comes up with our clients, we need to let them catch us being nice to people. And we need to let them
Mhm.
catch us being kind to people and saying kind
Right.
things, because that will signal that we're safe people to talk to. Of
Yeah, totally. Thanks, Ben.
course. Right. Any other thoughts?
Ben, I had a thought. My name's
Yeah.
Rainey. Um, I kind of, I've been listening to what everybody's been saying, and I feel I'm a pretty like approachable and accepting person, and people have often said, you're so easy to talk to, you're so welcoming to everybody. And I still remember when my niece, she got married to her girlfriend, now wife, and they didn't tell our family at all. They kind of just went to the courthouse and did it, and then they moved out of state. And it was probably a couple years, maybe 2 years later, that we were all like on a family Zoom call, and they told us that they were together and that they got married, and we were all happy. Our response was very supportive and loving. And I called her afterwards, and she had a rough upbringing, a lot of challenges, and she would always come to me, and we had lots of talks about you can come live with me if you need to, and those kind of things. So like very supportive, just our whole family. And I called her afterwards and I said, why didn't you feel you could tell us this sooner? Like, why wouldn't you let us come and be part of your wedding? And I think the takeaway, and she's like, I don't know, I wasn't sure what you guys were gonna think. And I was like, we love you, like regardless of anything else, like we love you, and we want to, be there and support you in big decisions and choices that you make. And we had a great talk about it. Like it wasn't, anything more than that. But it got me thinking that even though we take these measures to be open and accepting, that sometimes they're not ready either, but still keep doing it. Still create that safe environment for them. And when they're ready, they'll come.
Yes. Yeah, and you are exactly right. We can offer so much love, we can offer so much acceptance, but that doesn't mean that that's going to be received.
In my years working in the field, I learned that my bias, in my opinion, and whatever, it doesn't count when I am with my client. I am there to help them, and I don't judge whatever it is. People who use drugs or different religion, different anything, they're people, and they have a struggle like me. So when I am at work, my opinion, personal opinion, doesn't count. I always welcome to anything, because now we are talking about identity, but truth can be anything, about anything that is different, anybody who thinks different. So my job is help them to find themselves, welcome any comment, and accept whatever they want to, because the outcome is for them, it's not for me.
Yeah, that's wonderful, and I think that's exactly right. You know, that when we're meeting with the client, it's not about us or our personal beliefs. It's about, you know, their self-determination and their value system. Yeah, wonderful. I have a client who is trans, and her mom is like very active in my church. She had heard of me, and so she wanted her trans daughter to meet with me. But the trans daughter was like very angry at the church and like wanted nothing to do with it. So I'm meeting with this trans daughter, and she said, you know, I know you're active in the church. This is not going to work. Like, I don't want to see you. And I said, you know, you don't have to see me. And, you know, we're going to be here for the next 50 minutes already. So we can just see how this goes. And I said, you know, help me understand why, why you're concerned about meeting with me. And she said, well, I just don't want to hurt your belief system. I said, that is so kind. I'd be surprised if you could say something I haven't already heard. And I said, why don't we just give it a try for a few sessions? And now we've been seeing each other for well over a year. She's made huge progress, and she was testing me to see, like, in the first few sessions, to see if I understood what it's like to be trans, because I'm not a trans person. But I had done my homework. You know, I'd read books. You know, I talked to trans people, and I remember in one of our first sessions, she was saying something. I said, well, you know, a lot of trans people, you know, in the situation you're describing, will feel this way. And she's like, yes, how did you know? I was like, well, I've done my homework. And so some clients will come with this resistance, you aren't like me, so therefore you can't help me. And that doesn't have to be the case, because we can learn to step in their shoes, educate ourselves, so that we can help them really well. Okay, great. Any other thoughts?
There is a question in the Q&A.
Yeah.
Do you think if society was 100% accepting, and if homophobia didn't exist, do you think identity confusion would even arise for folks?
Yeah, you know, that is a great question. That is a world that cannot exist, or like will not exist, like a homophobia or transphobia free world. And so, you know, it's interesting to speculate. But this is what I've noticed, and I'll just give you an example of a book. There's a book called "This Is How It Always Is," and it's a novel. And the novel was, the author is a mom of a trans kiddo. And so the book is about this very liberal family who has five boys, and the mom always wanted a girl, and then the youngest child ends up being trans. And they're this liberal family that is not religious, and they're very accepting, but they walk through all the complications that exist when having a child who is trans. And I thought the book was so expertly done, because the family has no trouble with accepting their child. Like, that's not the problem. But it is complicated, and there are complications. And so, you know, and this isn't the case for everyone, but I would say the majority of humans, you know, want to find love, they want to find a partner, they want to raise a family. And if you are gay and married to someone of the same sex, you know, having a family is a much more complicated thing. And so, even if there was no transphobia, even if there was no homophobia, being LGBTQ is creates complications that can make life a little harder. So I think that there might be some identity confusion, even in a world that was so loving and so kind and so accepting. But this stage of identity confusion mostly exists because of the way society treats LGBTQ people and talks about LGBTQ people. And the reality is that in the last little bit, it's only been getting worse. And, you know, we've taken steps forward, and right now we're taking some steps back. But this identity confusion, for the most part, does exist because of the way society talks about LGBTQ people, and the heterosexism that does exist. You know, our society views heterosexual couples as being not only the standard, but better than LGBTQ couples. Yeah, thank you.
What was the name of that book that you just mentioned?
It's called "This Is How It Always Is."
Okay,
Yeah, this is how it always is. And I can't remember the name of the author off the top of my head, but it's very good, very engaging. All right, stage two is called identity comparison. This is when someone won't typically identify as gay or trans, but words like same-sex attraction or gender dysphoria feel safer. And that's because, gay or like pansexual or transgender, these are all identity labels. And this isn't a stage where someone wants to put on an identity label. They want to just describe an experience. And this isn't to say that someone who uses an identity label is more advanced than someone who doesn't. But typically in this stage, someone will choose to not use an identity label, and that's totally fine. And this is when someone sort of will compartmentalize their identity and behavior. So they'll say like, I'm not gay, but engage in no string same-sex behavior. This happens a lot, all over the world, but particularly in conservative religious communities. So someone will realize that they're experiencing same-sex attraction, and they'll feel really lonely and isolated. And they'll say, I just want to talk to someone about what I'm experiencing. So they'll get on a dating app and they'll be like, hey, I'm just looking for friends. I just kind of want to talk. And then they'll meet up with someone just to talk. And that person will flirt with them, will give them positive attention, will tell them that they're beautiful, and then might start to push their boundaries a bit. And they might end up engaging in a sexual experience with that person. And then they'll go home and they're like, okay, that's a crazy thing that happened. I'm not gay, but that's a thing that happened. And they're like, and then the next weekend they're like, I want to talk to someone else. I want to see what other people are experiencing. And then they'll do it again, and they'll do it again, and they'll do it again. I have seen this a lot with my clients, where they will be engaging in sexual behavior with other men, where they're like, I'm not gay. This is just something I'm just trying, and that's okay. This isn't time for us to describe any label, to put a label on anyone, but this is time to help them be safe. And so I've had to talk to a number of my clients, give them some basic tips on how to be safe if they're engaging in sexual activities. Not only safe from STIs, but also physically safe. And one of the things I tell them is if you're going to meet up with someone, someone needs to know where you're going and where you're going to be. And I tell them like if there's anyone you can talk to besides me, shoot me an email and then let me know when you are home as well. Okay, just so that there's someone who knows where you are and what you're up to. And I've also had to talk to a lot of clients about consent. Because they do not a lot of them don't understand that they're being pressured to engage in sexual behaviors that they don't actually want to engage in. And so it's been important for me to teach my clients about consent. And this has happened where I've had a client who was the one who was pushing for non-consensual behavior, like the best kid. Like if you could like pick a boyfriend for your adult child, like this is the kind of person you'd want to pick for like to date your kid, and yet he was pressuring his boyfriend to have sex when his boyfriend didn't want to have sex. And so then it was then my responsibility to teach him about consent, and to help him see as kindly as possible that he was pressuring his boyfriend to have sex when his boyfriend actually didn't want to have sex, and to help him engage with his romantic partner in a way that was a lot healthier. And at this stage, someone will feel shame and guilt while seeking a cure. How do I fix this? So this is the stage where we say, okay, this is real, this is happening, but I can fix it. This is when someone will go to therapy to change typically. And this is when we don't want to force or assume an identity on someone. I had a client come in and he said, I don't like the word gay. I don't like the word same-sex attraction. And he said, I don't want to use any labels. And I said, okay. So as we talked about his experiences, we didn't use any of those terms. And that was okay. That was what he wanted. That's what he asked for. And then, a few months later, he was referring to himself as gay. And that's okay. Labels are going to change. And so we don't want to force or assume that anyone will feel comfortable with a label, but use the labels that people choose. And this is when we want to avoid either approach, like either you're gay or you're straight, either you come out or you don't come out. Like this can be a really messy time in someone's life. We just want to like be with them on their journey and not prescribe anything for them. Okay. And we might feel tempted to offer advice on the right way to do life based on our values. But we want to help them really discover their values. So I've got a bit of a leading question for you. Why is it important to honor the label someone chooses? Especially if that label might not make sense to us. What do you think? Why is it important to honor the label that someone chooses?
Yeah, hi. It's their choice of how they identify, and it's not ours. We don't determine who they are. They're the only ones who know who they actually are.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, we don't get to choose who they are. They're the ones who are making that choice. I love that. Thank you. Any other thoughts?
Hi. I think like for me, I think like just having a label is just so difficult to have because then you kind of feel like trapped in it. Like for me personally, it's like when I want to change, it's like shoot, like do I have to come out again and kind of like do this all over again? Like it's just so difficult to kind of like get that from your own self, I guess.
Yeah. Dinesh, you just shared something really important, which is that, and I hear this from my clients all the time, like, well, I don't want to tell people because I'm not sure. And so
Right.
if I tell them one thing and then it end up being another thing, then I have to like retell them. That just feels so exhausting.
Right, like that's it. That's something that I feel like a lot of people, like at least in my circle, like we just struggle a lot to have like one label because it's just so hard to like stick with it.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you. And I know very few LGBTQ people who have been out for a while who haven't changed the label that they've used. It's a very common process, and so we should like honor that process and let people be with where they are. When I was in my 20s, like if I was 25 and out to like a dozen people, and if someone said, "Ben, you're gay," I would say, "I am not gay. I experience same-sex attraction." And then about the time I was 29, I started using the term gay. And that was a very purposeful and very deliberate process. And to me, the term same-sex attraction reminds me of those times when I hated who I was, when I would have done anything to change. And it reminds me of those years where I experienced passive suicidal ideation. And so the term same-sex attraction for me carries all this baggage. And so it's not a label that I choose for myself. And so about the time I was 29, I was like, okay, I've tried to change this. I tried to marry a woman that wasn't going to work. So I was going to move forward with my life the best way I can. And so I started using the term gay, not just because it's fewer syllables, but to me, it also represented like hope. Like I can live the best life the way that I came to Earth. And so for me, the term gay is very life-giving and hope-filled. And so, I'll talk to some people and I'll say, I'm gay. And they'll say, well, Ben, that's not a term that you need to apply to yourself. And, in my head, I'm thinking, you have no idea what my life has been like. And I'm happy to tell you. And so we don't want to be the person to tell our clients who they are or what's happening in their life, but let them be the expert. And this can be especially tricky with young people. If you have an 11-year-old client and the client says that they're asexual, they're barely even maybe in the stages of puberty, and it might feel natural to say like, well, it's kind of too early to put that label on yourself because you're so little, you're such a kid, and even with teenagers, we can honor the label that they choose and say, it's okay to continue understanding yourself, and it's okay to change that label if that's something that feels appropriate later on as well because most teens will change their label. Not all, but most. And we want to signal that we are someone that they can continue talking to, and we're not just going to shut down the exploration that they're experiencing. Right? Any other thoughts before we move on?
Hey, Ben, can I just
Yeah.
share, just, this is a very simple, personal thing that applies to me. I was reading in the chat where somebody said that it's just like a preferred name. And when I left home and went to college, I wanted to go by my middle name instead of my first name. I just did not, yeah, anyway, that's a whole nother story. But I really, I didn't think it was going to be an issue, but there was so much resistance and teasing and, oh, why do you need to do blah, 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 blah," and I just thought it was so disrespectful. It's like I get to choose what my name is, and I know that this is way simpler than what you're talking about, but But I go back to that moment quite often, and I think I remember how I felt, when people just wouldn't recognize that this is important to me, and so I remember that, and the feeling that I had of disrespect and just that I didn't matter, and so
Yeah.
I never want to forget that.
Yeah. And Kelly, thank you for sharing that personal experience. And I think where you're highlighting here is it's possible that we might be the only person that our clients feel comfortable talking to about what they're experiencing. And we might be the only person who honors the label that they choose, or the name that they choose. And we want to be that safe place where we honor their self-determination. Yeah, thank you. All right, stage 3 is called identity tolerance. This is when someone will start to try on more of a homosexual identity. So I say, well, maybe I'm gay, maybe I'm bi, maybe I'm non-binary or trans or genderqueer. And this is, they're just they're starting to try labels on. And they'll start to peek into the LGBTQ world to end social isolation and loneliness. So in stage 1, someone might come out to, maybe a handful of close people. In stage 2, someone will start to come out to, close family and close friends. Stage 3 is where they start to come out to more people, and they might go to to an LGBTQ club, or maybe they'll go to a Pride festival, or maybe they'll go to a support group, just to be with people who are experiencing something similar. And this can lead to culture shock and maybe even some identity confusion. So if you are, for example, like a really masculine man or a really feminine lesbian, and you go to something and people don't have the same interests as you, and you're a gay man who doesn't like musicals, or you're a gay woman who doesn't want to play sports, if you don't fit into that stereotype, it might feel like, oh, well, maybe I'm wrong about who I am. Maybe I'm not this if I don't fit in with these people. And that's very normal and very okay to be experiencing maybe some culture shock, like maybe not super fitting into the community. Or on the flip side, there are people like, oh my gosh, I finally found my people. These are the people I click with and connect with, and and that happens as well. And this is when some will still hope for a quote unquote normal life. So like, okay, I am gay, I am trans, but life is going to be normal. Like I'm going to have the life I expected. Like for a gay man like me, this would mean, okay, I'm still going to marry a woman. Like life is still going to be normal. I'm just understanding this part of my identity as well. And so some considerations for mental health professionals is to help clients see that there isn't a one size fits all LGBTQ experience. There's a great TED talk by Chimamanda Adichie called the Danger of a Single Story. And one thing she said, which I love, is that the problem with stereotypes isn't that they are untrue, but that they are incomplete. And so we don't want to just like say, okay, well, this is what a gay person is. This is what a trans person is. There's a whole spectrum of experiences in the LGBTQ community, and that there are all kinds of LGBTQ people, and they can find their niche. I used to be an administrator at BYU. And when I was working there, because of my book and my podcast, I would have LGBTQ students stop by my office all the time just to chat. And I had this one student come in one afternoon, and he said, I'm gay, but I love my faith, I love the church, I'm going to stay active, but there is no one here like me. Like I'm the only person like this. And then he left. And then a few hours later, someone came in. He's like, "Hey, I'm gay. I'm active in the church. It matters so much to me. I want to hold on to my faith, but there's no one like me." I was like, "Well, actually, there was someone here on that same couch just a few hours ago who was very similar to you." And so at this stage, if someone's just starting to come into the LGBTQ world, that they don't necessarily fit like the dominant narrative. They might feel really lonely and isolated. But there are all kinds of people, and there are people who have very similar experiences to them, and they can find people who are in their same niche. So here's my question for you: how can you help someone expand their view of what it means to be LGBTQ? If they think, well, this is what an LGBTQ person is, how can we help them see like a broader range of what that can mean? What are your thoughts?
Hi, my name's Ellie. I had a friend who went through basically the same things you mentioned in the beginning. He went through. Are you hearing me? Are
Yeah,
you
you sound
listening?
great.
Yeah. Okay. And I remember how it was hard for him when he was in his 40s when he finally gave that idea of like, I can't hold this anymore, you know. And when he came to me to let me know, when you talked about your friends, it kind of remind me our experience. He had all these fears, you know. He felt sick when he felt about telling people. But also when he finally got in and he felt like, I'm going to be happy now, the culture was a shock for him. And he also had people that got involved with that took advantage of his innocence and of how he wanted to. He still had that idea, I need to find someone to be happy forever, you know. And some people that he connected with didn't have that same idea, and how the transition was also very hard, and how the culture that he started experiencing uh, at the beginning was very hard, to the point that he felt so depressed he wanted to die after even like saying, I am gay and I want to embrace this.
Hallie, one of the points you brought up, which is so important, is we can help our clients develop their own culture and their own values and their own boundaries, so that if the dominant culture doesn't represent their values, to still hold space and boundaries for themselves. If it's common to kiss on a first date or have sex on a first date, and that's not part of their value system, we can teach them how to understand their own values and set boundaries, so that those are followed.
For sure.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, thank
Hmm.
you. Great. Other thoughts on how we can help someone expand their view of what it means to be LGBTQ?
I have a thought. Can you hear
Yeah,
me?
of course, Sky.
Um, so I feel like I am maybe like actually like late stage here myself. And like my therapist doesn't typically work with LGBTQ plus people. Um, and so she was like kind of able to um I don't know, to give me a few resources, but um I wish that I had like a plethora of of different events or something that I could um, just be shown, right? Like if I could have had just like a list of different groups or people that I could connect to, so that I could just go try it out. Because I've been doing that myself, um, and it's really difficult, like to just throw myself into it. But like as I've done that, like I've been able to find more of my niche. Like I started out, I went to a support group at I identify as a trans woman, by the way. And I went to a support group at in Circle, and it was good, but like everybody there was like so young, and I'm 35, and so like I didn't feel like I fit in at all. And so then I tried some other group, and it was like so discouraging, and I just felt like I did not belong anywhere. And but slowly, like I've been finding my way and kind of finding my people, and it's made such a big difference. If I just had like, I don't know, just like a list of things that might be interesting to me, then that would have been so helpful.
Yeah. Scott, that is wonderful, and a very common experience. Thank you for sharing that. And what I heard most from your comment is that being 35 is old. Uh,
Well, compared to all the other trans girls that were like 19, yeah.
Yeah, and thank you for sharing that. And here in Utah, there are there's a diverse range of activities for LGBTQ people. Not only do we have like the Pride Center in Salt Lake and in Circle, in a number of our communities here in Utah, but there are things like Stonewall Sports, where people just get together and they play sports. And there are movie nights and hiking clubs. there are all kinds of things and experiences. One of the areas that I found was less represented was what was people like me who were openly LGBTQ, who wanted to stay, active in our church. And so I worked to create a community, and we're hosting our big conference next weekend. And the first years we hosted, 1,300 people came. Because there are people who's like craving community, craving to be with people who have similar experiences. And I host monthly gatherings in my house, and most of the people who come are UVU students and BYU students, and we start at 7, and then at 11:30 I have to kick them out. I'm like, you guys have to go, go home. I have to go to bed now. And the reality is that they're just like so hungry to be with people who have similar experiences where they can just like talk openly, that people would stay forever. Like they'd stay till 2 if I let them. And what happens is, as people get to talk and share and get to know people with similar experiences, they see there's a wide variety of experiences as well. And one thing that can be important for clients is just helping them know, see a broad range of LGBTQ stories. And that can be, helping them go to the right events or the right group. It could be running group therapy, or it could just be, recommending a book or a podcast or an influencer to follow. And just helping them see like there are all kinds of people, and they can find their niche. Great. Any other thoughts? Yeah.
I have a question on that. So helping people expand their view of what it means to be LGBTQ plus, I think one of the challenges that I find is that I feel like there's so much I don't know, but in my lack of knowledge, I don't want to ask questions because I don't want to offend. And so I feel like that's a hard thing, is I think helping people to expand their view is having conversations, but also allowing people to have those conversations. And I've heard it before where it's not the person in that role that is responsible for answering your question. So then I feel even more guilty of like, then who do I ask? How do I get an understanding of this? Because I don't want to put that pressure on that person to inform me, but I do want the real answers.
That's a great question. So you do not have to be an expert on LGBTQ topics to work effectively with LGBTQ clients. We are always going to have clients who have different experiences than we do, which is why, these kinds of things and, continuing education is so important, so that we can continue to learn things that our clients might be experiencing and going through. But we are never going to have enough information. Like there's always more to learn. There are always gaps. I remember going to a 2-day training on eating disorders, and then as I listened to my clients, I was like, wait, do they all have eating disorders? And there was all this disordered eating that I was missing just because I didn't know about it. And now I had a little bit more information, and I could serve them better. So I would say, continue educating yourself, as you feel appropriate, read books, listen to podcasts, all that stuff. But I think it is appropriate to let your client be the expert on their life and their experiences. Because I think it would be equally bad if you have a client who says, "Oh, I'm trans." You're like, "Oh, I got this. I understand," because we just don't know. And so, if you have a client who is struggling, who might need to like have more understanding about what it means to be LGBTQ, or what their life could look like, and you don't have all the information, that's totally fine. I'd say it's perfectly appropriate to let them be the expert on their experience. And if they say something like, I'm experiencing this, and I'm wondering what this is like. What do you think? And you say, well, I don't know. I think it could be very appropriate for you to, pull out your laptop and, you two do some Googling together, and maybe look up some books or some resources, or some things happening in the community. I had a client who is going abroad for the summer and wanted to connect with LGBTQ people. Like, how do I find LGBTQ people in this country? I was like, I have no idea. Like, I've never been to that country. So together we, Googled like some things they could do, and things that were happening, where they were going, what the laws were, and that was very helpful. So, it's always okay to admit to your client that you don't know. It's always okay to like look for information with them, but I would say, I wouldn't put this pressure on yourself of feeling like you have to know everything about the LGBTQ experience to work with an LGBTQ client, because there are always going to be gaps in your understanding, always. Yeah, is that helpful?
Yes, thank you. I think I was thinking also in terms of like, how do I help someone expand their view is more community. How do I help the community also expand their view of what it means to be LGBT? And I think that's the aspect of like having more conversations within the community so that it challenging other people's maybe limited beliefs or views of what it means. But I think that's where it's hard is the politics of I don't know that people feel comfortable talking about it because they don't want to offend. That's more, I think, what I was talking about.
Yeah. Oh, that's wonderful. And as far as that goes, one of the things I love as a social worker is I have this person and environment perspective. I have this person who lives in their environment is affecting them. As a social worker, I don't just work with individuals, but I also work at this meso level and this macro level. And so, how can I change cultural understanding about issues that are affecting my clients, that are affecting what I do? And so not only do I work with, and not everyone's going to be like this. I'm maybe a bit of an overachiever here, but not only do I work with clients individually, but I have a book that's written towards straight people about the experiences of a gay Larry Saint. And I have a podcast that's more queer centric for people in my community. And I host this conference and these gatherings at my home. And I'm also like very open and public. Like anyone I know personally, if they have any questions, like I will sit down and talk with them, and I'm thrilled to do that. And so you're right. We need to just start modeling these kinds of conversations. And one of the ways we can do that is just to like talk about LGBTQ people in like natural, normal, organic, and positive ways. It's like letting people see like we're just going to talk about this in a very normal way. I'm in a relatively new congregation for me in my church. I live right by BYU. It's mostly retired BYU professors and like the young married couples living in their basements. And this older couple invited me over to their house for lunch, and I didn't know anything about them. And so I have a rainbow watch band that I wear. And when I got to their house, the wife hugged me and she said, "Ben, we are so lucky to have you in our community." And she said, "I love your watch band. I just want you to know, whatever you choose, we will always love you." I was like, "Oh, that is so kind." And she's like, "Is it okay if I ask you some questions?" I was like, "Yeah, of course." And we like had this like most beautiful conversation, and it was awesome. And that's a very positive experience. But those are the kinds of things that can happen and do happen as we are a little more open about what's going on. Yeah, Kylie.
I just wanted to quick share a story about being curious as a therapist. So I worked in a residential treatment program, so they're not like in their home community, right? I had a client who came out to me, but didn't want to come out to anybody else. We went and we toured in circle, and I could tell that he like loved it and loved the options. But we got back and we were talking about him joining a group, and he's just like no, and I just was like, what is going on? And so just this idea of getting curious and asking questions. Come to find out, he just didn't want the staff to like know that he was going there, to be dropped off or whatever. So we came up with this plan for him to be going to the coffee shop, right? Like, so he went to the coffee shop. There wasn't that many coffee shops at this time in Provo, but there was one that was down by Encircle. Thank you, coffee shop by Encircle. And then he walked down and he did Encircle, and eventually like was able to like find some people in a group and come out. But that was such a lesson for me, to be like, how do we, like, it's not just how do we connect them to the community, but how do we lower barriers or create a space where people can discover and do things, especially if they're not ready to come out. And it just like was grateful for uh being curious and asking questions and how that can lead to like more opportunity.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you, Kylie.
Ben, there is somebody asking a question in the chat.
Yeah.
It says, oh, there it is. I am working with an LDS couple. The husband asks his wife to use sexual toys pretending to be a male. He told me that he knows this is temporary temptation and he's going to overcome. What would be your best advice for the wife?
Oh, that is for the wife, that is an especially difficult place to be in. And it's possible, like with this husband, this might not be an identity thing. It might just be a fetish thing or a kink thing. Like that's all possible. And there are heterosexual men who sometimes enjoy having sex with men or enjoy like fantasizing about having sex with men. So there's a wide range of possibilities. I wouldn't want to assume anything like about this guy's identity. But as far as the wife, what I would say is I would want to talk to her about what her boundaries are and what feels comfortable to her. And when it comes to any kind of intimate behavior, it could be really damaging for her to participate in an intimate activity that doesn't feel comfortable to her. And some people will try new things to be adventurous or to have a new experience to see how something feels, and that's totally normal and okay to like be uncomfortable in a new experience, but to be wanting to try that new experience. But if it's something that she feels uncomfortable about, I would probably talk to her about boundaries and only engaging in sexual behaviors that feel comfortable to her. And I would also say that when it comes to this is a time when spouses will often start speculating about their spouse's orientation or gender identity, and that speculation is often not helpful. We want to just like trust the person, like trust what the other person says about their experience, even if we might suspect that they're gay or trans or having a different experience.
Exactly. I think consent also applies within a married relationship.
Mhm.
Remembering that definitely.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, of course. All right. So stage 4 is called identity acceptance. And this is when a very interesting thing happens, a big shift happens. So in the earlier stages, there are these feelings of like, I'm bad, I'm wrong, I need to change. There are these feelings of shame and guilt, but it's all internalized. So the first 3 stages involve the individual and maybe close family and friends and a little bit of the broader community, but not a lot of people. This is a pretty closed experience. And stage 4 is when people start to be more open. And so all those feelings of self-hatred and doubts that were pointed inward are now pointed outward. So instead of I'm bad, I'm wrong, I need to change, it's you're bad, the church is wrong, society needs to change. And they're the exact same feelings, but now they're pointed outward. And this is when someone will start to have increasing anger towards, homophobic or transphobic elements of society. People will see things in the news or comments people say, and instead of like holding that in and being hurt by it, now they're mad. And I'll talk to my clients about, how anger is very normal at this stage, and the anger is often a secondary emotion that it's hiding something else. It's covering up something that's maybe harder to deal with. And so we'll talk about, okay, what is that anger? What is that anger saying to you? Is it actually about rejection? Is it about fear? Is it about isolation? Is it about judgment? And we talk about those things. And families also go through similar stages of understanding, their queer child. And so I'll have families who or parents I'm working with who get to a place of like, I love my queer kid. I'm so happy for them. They're going to have this normal life. And I'll kind of prepare them for this next day. Like, well, as you understand more, you might start to get a little angry. And they often do. And, not all families move through all these stages. But families also will get really angry at what they would perceive as homophobic elements of society. And, those are feelings to work through as well. This is the beginning of what's called the queer adolescence. So for straight people, when straight people are in their teens, they get to have crushes on peers. They get to go on dates with peers. They get to write on their notebook like Mr. and Mrs. So and so, and have all these like feelings of twitterpation, and they get to learn the difference between love and infatuation. And they do this in an environment, hopefully, of safety, with peers involved, maybe with their family and their parents involved, and it's not done in isolation. So for people like me who came out later in life, I didn't get to have those maturing experiences. I didn't get to learn the difference between love and infatuation because I was going on dates with people I wasn't actually interested in. So when people like me who come out later in life start having romantic experiences, people don't know the difference between love and infatuation. So someone might be in their 20s, 30s, 40s, or 50s, but when it comes to the romantic life, maturationally, they're like 14 or 15. And so, imagine the trouble like teenage you would have gotten in trouble, or imagine the trouble teenage you would have gotten into. But now you're an adult with a car and an apartment and a lot more access to privacy. And so people get into a lot of trouble. And so when I talk to my adult clients who are starting to date, one of the things I recommend they do is that they have a friend they talk to either before or after, maybe even both, a date, so that like red flags can be pointed out. I had one client who came in and she was so excited because she had started dating and she had found this woman and they were going to get married. And I was like, that is so exciting, you know? And I said, tell me how you met. She said, well, we met on this dating app 2 weeks ago. We're meeting up in person tomorrow for the first time. And they didn't get married. Which is, but she was so excited because she was flirting with someone who was flirting back, who she found attractive, who thought that she was attractive. And so, we want to let our clients be where they are, but also help them set up realistic expectations. And it's really good for clients in this queer adolescent stage to have someone trust that they can talk to who can point out red flags that they might not see. One of my friends says that the fun thing about a crush is that you know 2% about the person, and then you make up the other 90% in your head, or 98% in your head, and it's all good. That's what a crush is. And that's I think that's pretty accurate. And so here we have people who are entering into this new stage, and everything is perfect and roses when really it might not be. And it's actually quite common for LGBTQ people who are raised in a conservative religious environment when they start dating to marry the first person they date. And that might not necessarily be a problem, but if they aren't understanding, like, well, this is infatuation and not love, we just want to help them like talk through those experiences. And at this stage, much like adolescents, they seek privacy and new friends as they explore their orientation and gender identity. This is when someone will like someone's friend group will become the majority queer. This is what that will start to happen in this stage, and people have a lot of grief over the quote unquote lost years. I'm not just talking about the years where Lost was a hit show on ABC, but the years where they were hiding, there was shame, and they might feel guilt for things that happen, for things that they missed out on. For someone who starts dating in their 30s or 40s, like, this is wonderful, I'm loving myself, and now I'm so behind. And so there can be a lot of feelings to work through there. And it's very common for queer people to actually be a few years behind their peers when it comes to jobs, romantic life, because we spend so much time like dealing with our orientation or gender identity, and people who are in the heteronormative sphere, they don't have to spend that time working on things that we work through. One thing I often say is that when I was closeted at BYU, I spent hours in the library reading books about what makes people gay and how to fix it. And like dozens of hours in the library secretly reading those books. When my peers, they weren't worried about that. They were just doing their homework and playing volleyball or whatever it is BYU students do, and having a great time. Where I was like doing this internal struggle, and so a lot of us end up feeling like we have years that we might have lost. So some considerations for you all is that they might distance themselves from their friends and family this time. They might be mad at their friends or family. They might not trust them anymore. They might be annoyed at the choices that the friends and family are making. So how can we support a client who is dramatically reshaping their social life? What can we do to support a client where they might be pulling away from friends and family and starting a brand new social life? What are your thoughts on how we can support clients during this time?
Oh my gosh, I'm so nervous to talk in this. Hey Ben, how's it going?
Hey, Halls.
So this is like such an interesting place, because what I found is like how like a client comes out as trans, and now it's like, hey, in a family therapy setting, if mom and dad don't leave like the church, for example, they're not truly supporting me, and I don't feel like, and you're in this situation, and um, outside of like validating emotions, holding space for the pain and confusion, and I know those are like textbook answers, but I know, and I'm curious to hear what your response to this, because it's a scary place to hold space, but to also like recognize like this is very real. Like when someone says, "Hey, this is my identity," and then like maybe I lose a calling in church because of this identity, and I don't know. I think it's very complicated. I'm so excited and interested to hear like your thoughts on this.
Yeah, that's a great question, Halls. And one of the things I've done a lot with my clients is they'll say things like, my parents said this stupid thing, like, how dare they? And I say, that is so painful. Like, that is a really hard thing to hear. And I'll validate the pain. And I'll say, did you ever believe that too? And almost every time, the really homophobic or transphobic thing that their loved one says is something that they themselves believed. Now, it doesn't give the family a pass, But it can provide a perspective and maybe some grace to say, okay, well, I thought that 3 years ago. What's my family going to think in 3 years? And is there any way that I can maybe educate them or give them space to learn and grow? Yeah. But you're right, Hall. It's a tough space because we want to validate, but we also want to give them tools so they can engage with their family, engage with their friends, engage with their loved ones. Yeah. Any other thoughts?
Yeah, so there's this episode on Grey's Anatomy where Arizona and Callie, who have entered into a relationship together, and Arizona has been gay for a long time, and Callie has not. She comes out a little bit later, and there's an issue with her parents not accepting her, and um, Arizona says, "Your dad hasn't changed, but you have." And I think that that's a really good perspective in the sense that the person who may have come out later has gone through all these things internally by themselves. And now the people around them are going to have to go through those things on their own. And just reminding people that this is a process. And all of a sudden, you've like flipped the table a little bit. And that's not saying that anything bad has happened. It just means that there might be an adjustment period.
Yeah, Geraldine, that is such a beautiful perspective, and you're exactly right. Because our family and our loved ones might see us in one way, and we've been going through all this internal stuff, and they haven't. And so we need to give them the opportunity to go through that as well. And offering them that grace and that time to grow is so important. And so when it comes to mental health professionals, one thing I talk to my clients about is what do you wish your family understood? What do you wish your neighbors and your friends understood? And is there a way that you could help them to know that? When I was getting ready to come out, I wrote this little essay about my experiences, just like answer people's basic questions. So I would come out like, here's this thing, read this thing. And that just gave them a good mode of understanding. And so I talk to my clients like, how do you express yourself? What do you use to teach people things? And sometimes it's writing, sometimes it's a song. For some people, it might even be like doing a dance. There's all kinds of ways that people express themselves and share who they are. And I encourage my clients to think about ways that they could offer to bring people into the experience that they've had if they feel comfortable doing that. And not everyone will want to do that. They might just say, you know what, my family has hurt me too much, and I don't want to open myself up to more hurt by being so open and vulnerable with them. And you know what? That's their choice. They get to make that choice. But offering family time to grow and time to learn can be so helpful. I have a trans client who has been so mad at his parents he came out to them tentatively when he was about 16, and they're like, oh, this is just a phase. And then and these are like wonderful, like top-notch parents. But they just weren't prepared for that conversation. They didn't respond well, and they thought it really was a phase and it had gone away. And then 5 years later, at 21, he was like, actually, I'm still trans, and I would have liked to have started transitioning 5 years ago, and now it's kind of too late. Like things have happened to my body that and so this client has dealt with a lot of like anger towards the parents, and then the parents have he's signed an ROI, and the parents have come in to talk about things in session, and they have apologized, expressed love, and they're moving forward. But these are complicated situations where we're dealing with things internally, the clients are dealing with things internally, and might not be sharing fully with their loved ones, and then they get upset with their loved ones for not being as understanding as they would want them to be, because not as much information is shared. And so, helping our clients navigate that can be tricky, but also can be so valuable for them. All right, we'll go on to the next stage. We got two more stages. So stage 5 is called identity pride. This is the stage that straight people or people who aren't involved in the LGBTQ community are most likely to observe. And this is when they will say that someone is over-identifying with the LGBTQ subculture. So they'll devour books and information about LGBTQ topics. This is when someone's quote unquote queer age might not match their chronological age. Like I've had clients who are like professional adults. But when it comes to, and they're like fully formed individuals who are very mature. But when it comes to talking about queer topics, they get really defensive really fast. And the kind of grace they might offer people in other situations, they just can't do that when it comes to LGBTQ topics. And this is when previous repression becomes liberation, and they might have what others might say is an in-your-face attitude because they want to come out to the world. And so this is where there's this big pendulum swing from, in the earlier stages, I'm not LGBTQ, this isn't happening. And then in this stage, the pendulum goes the other way and like, I am LGBTQ, and that is the only thing that matters about me. And so this is when someone's identity, whether their orientation or their gender identity, matters so, so much. And this is a really important process as it helps people heal from their shame. After all the years of hiding and isolation, being so open can be so healing and so wonderful for them. So I was giving this presentation a bit ago, and someone raised their hand and said, "So how should I respond if I see a picture of my cousin wearing a rainbow speedo in a pride parade?" And then before I could answer, someone else said, "I think that person's just trying to heal from their shame." And that is exactly what's happening here. People are healing from their shame by being open and by really engaging in this LGBTQ world. And some consideration for you all is that being LGBTQ plus is not a phase, but the pride stage is a phase. The pendulum won't always stay at this far end, but this is an important part of healing from someone's shame and self-hatred. So my pride stage looked a little different. I was a very active Latter-day Saint, and when I came out publicly at the age of 30, I was like I started finding, like, I came out publicly on my blog, which was a thing we used to have before everyone had a podcast. So I blogged about, like, I started sharing my experience on a blog, and then I started blogging about my experiences like 3 to 4 times a month. Like, here's what it's like to be a gay Latter-day Saint. I was just like constantly sharing. And then because I was blogging about it, I started hearing from strangers who were also having similar experiences, but they lived in these far-flung places. And I was living in Tucson, Arizona at the time where I got my PhD. And I thought, well, I don't know any gay Latter-day Saints in my town, but there has to be. So I started a support group for other LGBTQ Latter-day Saints, and within 2 years it grew to a few dozen people, and we were meeting twice a month, like as a group. So twice a month I was getting together for the support group I started. I was blogging about my experiences, and then noticing the homophobia that exists in our community, we started these things that we called ally nights, where two of us from the LGBTQ support group would share our stories in someone's house, and then we would let people ask us questions. And we did one of those once a week. Like, my life was so gay. It was so, so gay. Like, it was all I was talking about, all I was thinking about. And I'm sure that was jarring for some people who had no idea that I'd been going through this the whole time. And suddenly, all I was gay, and that was all I wanted to talk about. But that was such an important part of me healing from my shame, just like being open, being seen, sharing my story, and hoping to educate the community. And so one thing I'd recommend is that you be open to learning. So if you have a client who's in the stage and they're reading something or watching something or listening to something, be open to say, hey, I would love to like read that as well. I'd love to try that as well. I had a client who was really into anime, and which is not a genre of literature I typically read. And he had read this anime that was like, this was my story. He's like, will you read it? And I was like, sure, send it to me. So he did, and I did. And it gave me a little bit of insight into his experience, and that was great. And we don't have the time and the resources to like read a book for every client we have. But that's something I would consider doing. Like whatever your client is excited about and interested in, be excited and interested in that too. And as people feel more seen as they get to share their story and feel heard, that's what helps them move from this pride stage to the next stage. So my question for you is just a very general question, but how do you think you can be supportive to clients in this stage? If being LGBTQ is like the most important thing to them, how can we be supportive of them in this stage? What are your thoughts?
I think that the most important thing that we can do is to let them be excited, to let them share their story, to be active listeners, and to ask questions that that promote them being able to explore more of what they're experiencing. Because
Yes.
at this, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just actively listening. I just said yes.
Yeah, exactly. See, just because they might not have somebody else in their life that they can be this excited with. Um, and I think being able to celebrate those like milestones of being able to be happy and be excited and word vomit all over the place, just being that safe space is so important.
Yeah, I love that. That is so important. Just like if they're excited, let's be excited. Yeah, thank you. Other thoughts?
I'm curious if our queer clinicians, do you self-disclose in
Yeah.
any of these stages? I'd love to hear feedback on that.
Yeah, that is a great question, and maybe some other people have some experiences as well. I'm in a very odd space because I'm very public, with my book, with my podcast, and so most of my clients who reach out to me are already aware of me, so they know a bit about me and about my story, and so they already know a lot about my life, and so for me, the self-disclosure in a lot of ways has already happened. And so I try and be really intentional with my self-disclosure. The code of ethics, the social work code of ethics talks about this, and how we should consider self-disclosure. And so if I'm disclosing something, like for my own benefit or because, it feels like we're hanging out and I like want to share a similar story, that's not helpful. But if I'm self-disclosing in a way that could be beneficial to the client, that then, that's really what I want to think like my self-disclosure needs to be in the best interest of my client. And I was doing group therapy with some LGBT with like an LGBTQ group a bit ago, and I had this like light bulb moment as they were talking. And I was like, no, I will write that in my journal later. Like it's not time for me to share this because this isn't about me. And another time, this is before I was really public. I was working at LDS Family Services, and I used to wear a rainbow ring, and I would take that off whenever I was meeting with the client because I didn't want like my orientation didn't matter. And I was talking with the client, and she was gay, and she was really struggling. She said, I just feel really alone. I feel like there's no one like me. And as she shared a little bit, I said, is it okay if I share something personal? I said, I'm also gay, and I actually have this rainbow ring in my pocket that I take off when I meet with clients. And she just sobbed. She said, I had no idea that there was someone who was like me. And so, we want to be really intentional about our self-disclosures in session. And so I would say that the thought would be, okay, would this disclosure be in the best interest of my client? And for me, like my life was just so public that my clients are involved in a lot of my self-disclosure. And that gives us sometimes things to talk about. Sometimes I say something on a podcast and my client will come in and they say, that thing that happened to you made me really upset. And then I have to like then process with them this thing that involves me, but I'm not looking at it from like my involvement in the situation, but how they're reacting to the thing that happened to me. Mhm. And one time I had a client who was like so filled with shame. He was like, being gay is such an awful thing. Like, I just so wish I wasn't gay. And I asked him, I said, are there any gay people that you look up to who you think like are good people? He said, yeah, you. I was like, okay, well, this is a little awkward now, but well, what is it about me and my experiences being gay that you look up to? And then we got to talk about that, and because he wanted to be anything but gay, and I was like, well, are there things that you look up to in me about my experiences being gay that could also apply to your life that could make you a good person? And we talked about that, and it was good. But so there, I'm gonna start rambling, so that's the end of my comment.
We have something in the Q&A. Somebody wants to have, wondering if they can get ideas for how to prepare parents or family for when my sibling decides to come out to them without accidentally outing them to my family.
Mhm. Yeah, that is a great question. What I'd recommend doing is, reading something or like listening to a podcast or like watching a movie and being like, oh my gosh, I saw this thing, or I read this thing, or I listened to this thing. It was so good. I would love to share it with you. And just giving them some access to the space. And there are lots of things that could be like really non-threatening. Like there's a romantic comedy that just came out called A Nice Indian Boy, about this gay Indian in his 30s who's having trouble dating. And then he has this meet cute. He meets Jonathan Groff, who's a white guy, but he was raised Hindu by adopted parents, and so he starts dating this guy who is white but also Hindu. Then he introduces him to his family, and the family is like, "Well, we're okay that you're gay, but why are you dating this white guy? But also he's Hindu." And it's very funny and very heartwarming. And so, like, that is like such. I'm not saying you need to be that movie, but like, there are things like this that are just like so non-threatening and so mainstream. Because hey, I really like this. Like, maybe you should watch it too. And like, there's this show on Netflix called Heartstopper about these two gay teens in England. It is so good. It's so heartwarming. I watched the whole first season with my 80-year-old father, and he loved it. And it led to some really good talks and conversation. So I would say, offer them some like really non-threatening things to read and listen to or watch, and just make them things that you have enjoyed, so that you can then share. Like, hey, I really love this. Like, maybe we could read it and talk about it. And when it comes to someone who's not out, I'm not much of a liar in my regular life, but I think it's okay to lie and cover for people. Like if you're worried about like accidentally outing a sibling, like, and your parents like, oh, do you think so and so is gay? You say, no, I don't think so. Like you don't have to like you don't have to disclose anything you don't want to disclose when it comes to these things. Yeah. All right. Anything else? Any other thoughts? Okay. So the last stage is called identity synthesis. And this is when the concept of us versus them starts to break down. So it's not the queer people against the straight world, and they'll reintegrate into larger society. This is when people will still have their friend group might be mostly queer people, but they might reintegrate into friend groups they had before. And this is when like the heterosexism and homophobia and transphobia that did dominate their lives, that caused so much angst, no longer dominate their lives. And people still get mad about things, they'll still get upset about things happening in society, but it's not this like overwhelming experience that might have happened before. And then once orientation or gender just become part of their identity. There's this great show on Netflix called Queer Eye. I should really get a royalties for like promoting all these books and shows. But there's this show called Queer Eye. It's about these five queer individuals who show up in someone's life for a week, and they like do therapy with them, and they teach them how to cook, and they give them a new wardrobe, and they remodel their house. And it's really beautiful. I cry like every 10th episode. And in one episode, they work with a trans man. And so they go into this trans guy's house, and it's just rainbows everywhere and trans flags everywhere. Like the whole thing is just like gay and trans, the whole house. And Bobby, who is the home designer, he says, okay, so being trans, being queer is an important pillar in your house. And there are these other pillars in your house that we're also going to honor. And at this identity synthesis stage, that's what happens. Our gender identity, our orientation becomes an important part of who we are. And it's no longer none of who we are or all of who we are, but it's an important aspect of who we are. And so this is a stage where we integrate this part of who we are, hopefully without shame, without self-judgment, we can move forward in a healthy way. And some considerations for you all is that young people tend to go through these stages faster and even all at once. And they might be angry and proud and tentative and outspoken all at the same time. So you might have a teen who is like, I am queer and I love myself. And the next day they're like, how dare this law be passed? Everyone hates me. Life is awful. I wish I wasn't like me. And that is so common and so okay. And so be prepared for some whiplash to occur when working with younger LGBTQ clients. And that's okay. And that's normal. All right. So the typical stages people go through when coming out are first coming out to themselves, then coming out to close friends, then coming out to close family, and then coming out more broadly. Why do you think someone would come out to close friends before coming out to family? Why do you think that would be the typical way that the coming out process usually happens?
I think you get to practice seeing what somebody, you know, that cares about you, like how they might react before, and potentially you could let go of them, right? Like potentially if it's a bad response, you could maybe lose that friend. You don't want to, but telling your family you're stuck with them forever, for good or bad.
Yeah, Kylie, you're exactly right. When it comes to your family, you can't pick a new family, but if you lose your friends, you can get new friends. And so a lot of people will test the waters with friends before coming out to family. Yeah, any other thoughts?
I think, can you hear me?
Yeah.
I think my situation was kind of the opposite in that, like, I came out to my parents first, mainly because I didn't want rumors to start about me, and I knew my parents would keep my secrets. Also, my parents were safe to talk to about that kind of thing. Granted, at the time, it was still from the perspective of like, oh, well, you can get through this. Like, oh, God will make it all better. But like, it was still, it was still more supportive than what I perceived my friends would do with that information, which might be, go spread it around the school, and all of a sudden I'd be out and potentially bullied because of it. So I think that might be sort of a counter reason why like somebody might come out to their family first and not their friends.
Yeah, awesome. Karen, thank you for sharing that out of perspective. That's a very important perspective. Thank you.
Yeah.
I just
remember
wanted to, sorry, I just wanted to add that I had my best friend was married to a man and came out later in life. And I was the first person she came out to. And I think she talked a lot about like having some anxiety of coming out to her parents for fear of them being more religious and more conservative. And so it just felt safer to come out to a friend that maybe she had been more open with versus, a family member that maybe has a little more religious baggage or conservative ideas. So I think that definitely can contribute to individuals wanting to come out to their friends more than maybe their family.
Yeah, the friends might have similar worldviews, similar life experiences, like they're your peers. And so it might feel safer to come out to peers. Yeah, Helly, you also had a comment.
what I was saying is exactly what she said. Is like my friend when he came out to me, like he reported it that he was feeling literally nauseous every time he thought about telling his parents because they were so conservative and religious and had all these things, and he was feeling physically sick. The experience was better than he thought, but his anxiety about doing it was terrible.
Yeah, yeah, thank you. And that is such a common experience. That like sense of like physical illness like happens to a lot of queer people before they come out. Yeah, thank you so much. One thing I want to share is that, when I work with clients who, aren't really out to their families or out to someone who's important to them and they're considering it, almost every time the thing they envision happening is the worst possible scenario. And it is sometimes the worst thing does happen, but it usually doesn't. It's almost always better than they expected, even if it still doesn't go great. It's usually better than the worst case scenario that they plan in their mind. So one of the things I do when I work with clients who are thinking about coming out to someone who really matters to them is helping them structure the conversation. And so we go through the things that they want to say, the things that they want them to know. And sometimes I'll even help them come up with questions that they would want their loved one to ask. And I say, it's okay to just like write down these questions and say, hey, mom and dad, I'm kind of nervous about this. Here's a list of questions. Could you just ask me these questions? And, just giving them a bit of feeling a bit of control in this conversation that they're scared of, that matters so much to them, can be really helpful. I've helped a number of clients come up with a list of questions like hand to their parents. I only have one client who actually handed that list to their parents. Most of them end up not doing it, but just the process of going through, okay, this is what I want to have happen. This is what I'm nervous about, and feeling that sense of, okay, I have a bit of control here. Like I have a sense of what's going to happen, can really reduce the stress. Yeah. All right. We're going to go through just a few quick scenarios that represent. Oh,
Before
yeah.
you move on, we do have one more question in the chat. Is that
Yeah,
okay?
of course.
Okay, it says, how do you help people develop out of the us versus them stages when externally, politically, and systematically that idea has so much fuel? It seems harder for people I know or clients to move into this synthesis stage because it's like a counter to the environment of hate?
Yeah, that is a great question. And I would say, if they're upset, if they're feeling scared, like let them feel that way. Like let them be that way. And it might not be the time for them to like change how they're viewing the world. I had a client who recently was saying that he couldn't have anyone in his life who voted for Donald Trump for president, because that represents hate. It represents someone who doesn't believe in his rights or his ability to exist as a trans person. And so, I started like push gently back against that, and he got incredibly defensive. Like he was like, no, I cannot have anyone in my life who voted for Donald Trump. And one of the ways I pushed back was, would you feel comfortable coming to see me if I'd voted for Donald Trump? And he said, no, I would stop. And there just like wasn't space there, and so it didn't feel like the time to engage in that conversation. I chose to move on and discuss something else, which, right or wrong, it's what I chose. And so one of the things that I do encourage clients to do is to have a broad range of people in their life. If you are scared of someone who voted a certain way or has a certain political philosophy or certain religious philosophy or belief, engage with those people, get to know them. And there's a book I often recommend. It's called Love Your Enemies, by Arthur Brooks. And it's all about getting to know people who have different experiences and different opinions. And the reality is that when we get to know people like on a person-to-person level, we might have like very strong disagreements with them. But people will generally like us as people and be able to have good relationships with us. So one thing that helps me, like I'm in this very conservative congregation, at church that I go to, and I'm surrounded by people who voted differently than me and I think would be very happy if like gay marriage went away. But I know them, and they know me, and I know that even if they don't support gay marriage, like if I chose to marry a man, they would come, and they would at least try to be happy for me. And so what I help my clients see and even practice is understand that we don't have to have, like, we can have very deeply held differences but still engage with the people on the person to person level. Like what do you care about, what matters to you, and engage with them, and like what are the values that matter to you. Is that helpful? Yeah. Okay, great. That book I mentioned was Love Your Enemies by Arthur Brooks. It's quite good. Okay. I just have a couple scenarios for us to discuss, and we might not have time for all of them, but these represent clients that like real people that I have worked with. So we're gonna think about like going from the stages model, like what someone in this stage might need. So here's the scenario. The client says, why would God do this to me? Why would he make me this way? I think it would be better if I didn't even exist because I'm depressed all the time, and my parents would die if they knew I struggle with same-sex attraction. My mother might actually have a heart attack if I tell her. I just want these feelings to go away. Okay, so there's a lot of intensity here. There's a lot of fear here. There's a lot of worry here. There's a lot of shame here. What might a client in this stage need?
I think they would probably need some validations about their feelings.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah, some simple validation, like I hear you, I see you. That feels so hard, so painful. Yeah, thank you. What else might this client need?
It definitely sounds like they need hope. They need to have some type of like something to be looking forward to, because they're very much stuck in like this like, oh, there is no hope, there is no future, there's nothing in front of me.
Yes, yeah, helping them like develop some hope. I love that, Kate. Thank you. Yeah, other thoughts? I love the name Kate Felt. It's a name that's a full sentence. Let me just point out something that's important here that's pretty subtle. You know, when this person says, I think it would be better if I didn't even exist. You know, what we're seeing here is some suicidal ideation. And what we need to figure out is if this is passive suicidal ideation or active suicidal ideation. Like, is this client safe or are they not safe? And, you know, we know from the interpersonal theory of suicide that suicidal ideation increases in the presence of two factors, thwarted belongingness and perceived burdensomeness. So is this person feeling like they don't belong, or are they feeling like they're a burden? You know, clearly here they feel like a burden because, you know, I might kill my mother if I tell her. You know, that's a big burden. And do I belong? You know, like this confusion about like, why would God do this to me? You know, so this person is experiencing some kind of suicidal ideation. So the question I always ask my clients, I learned this question from Taryn Hyatt, who works with suicide prevention in the state, and she says to normalize the experience and then to ask the question in a non-threatening way. So I first normalize the experience. I say, you know, a lot of people who experience same-sex attraction consider taking their life. So I normalize it. And then I ask it in a very non-direct way. And I say, is that something you're considering? So a lot of people who experience same-sex attraction consider taking their life. Is that something you're experiencing? And that's very non-threatening. I would say 3 out of 4 times I ask this of my clients, they say yes. And then I ask them, you know, like, do you have a plan? Is the like, do you have the means? And with almost all my clients, they don't. Like they aren't actually considered they aren't actually planning to take their life, but life is so hard and so overwhelming that it feels like it'd be nice to just go to sleep and not wake up. And so, you know, so I want to make sure my clients are safe. I want to make sure that we have some kind of safety plan, if there is some kind of suicidal ideation that might be active here. Okay. Any other thoughts on what this client might need?
I see a lot of anxiety and depressive thoughts in his statements. And like with anxiety, you will like awfulize a lot. Like my friend, he was like thinking that would be a disaster, that things would be awful, that his parents, and then it was a lot easier than he thought it was. So maybe try to debunk the anxiety that's in there. That and a depressed mind tends to always awfulize things like worse than it will be, and kind of instilling hope that might not be the way that he thinks it's gonna be.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that, Hallie. Thank you so much. You know, there's a lot of anxiety here, a lot of depressive thoughts. And, you know, one thing to understand, you know, when it comes to this kind of like depression, anxiety, this shame, this self-hatred that comes with someone who is LGBTQ but doesn't want to be, that doesn't just go away. You know, it's not like we say the right thing and they're like, oh my gosh, I love myself. You know, that's very rarely the case. And so this is going to be a long process. And so really just getting clients to talk about their experiences, process their experiences, and then like Kate said, like notice those moments of hope and help them to amplify that. And really helping them understand what they're experiencing can be so helpful. You know, and I don't usually do this, but you know, with a client recently, I did the empty chair technique where you know, I have an older client who is super depressed, and I had him give his younger self like talk to his younger self and give him the praise that he wished he had had when he was a kid. And this client had a very strong reaction. And then I had him pull out his phone and record a video to himself. Like, and what does current you need to hear? Like, what praise does current you need to hear? And once again, you know, he was very emotional. And we had tried affirmations in the past, and he said this was so much better than affirmation because saying it to myself is so hard, but saying it to someone else is so much easier, even if that person is me, and like depersonalizing it. And so, you know, this is going to be a long process for a lot of people. But just letting them know, like I see you, I hear you. And one of the things I do is like I often recommend like a show like Heartstopper, for my client to watch if I feel like that's a good stage for them, or something for them to read so they can see like there are gay people who are thriving who are living like such good, wonderful lives. And that can be you too. Yeah. Great. Any other thoughts?
Yeah,
Okay,
Ben,
we'll
there's a great comment, a couple of great comments in the chat. They're identifying themselves or basically saying that God is important to them in their lives. So I don't see it as a teaching moment necessarily, but drill down on that value and why they see that value. And that, you know, maybe he doesn't make mistakes and maybe there is a purpose. And we just don't know what that purpose is yet. And you're not broken and you are okay. And that feeds back into the validation and some of the other comments that we've heard. Sorry, my monitor's way up there, so guys are
you're just looking heavenward.
Yeah. Anyway, I think I would explore that value proposition that they submit. Why would God do this to me? Why would he make it this way? Obviously, they value that relationship somehow.
Yeah.
So bring some love into that relationship and help them to accept themselves better.
I love that. That is such an awesome perspective, Jim. Because, you know, someone's spirituality is a tool that they use in their life. You know, it's an important belief system. It's something that shapes their worldview, and we can use that in therapy to, you know, if there's this loving being who cares about you, who you believe is your parent, you know, how does that work during this tough time? And you know, and considering this question, like why would God make me this way? You know, what is the reason here? I love that. Thank you, Jim. All right, we'll do one more scenario. This once again representing a client of mine. Utah is such a toxic environment. The legislature is queer-phobic and they hate people like me. I don't know why I even live here. I should just leave all this behind, move away, and never look back. Okay, once again, you know, very strong feelings, very strong emotions. What might this person need from a mental health professional?
As someone who has had to study recent bills that have passed, and someone who is very angry with some of the bills that are passed, I think just validating that, yeah, this is not a great situation. And if they aren't feeling safe, or if they feel like maybe there is a better place, maybe exploring that. Like, it, you know, if you want to live in a safer queer space, we can start that research. You know, like, but if they want to stay and, you know, continue the way they've always been, like, they can also do that. And just validating that, yeah, it's frustrating to live in a place that you don't feel respected or safe, but also, you know, exploring options and letting them talk out what they're feeling and what they're thinking.
Yeah, Geraldine, that's an awesome perspective. You know, validating their experiences, like, yes, this feels crazy. You know, this is hard. And okay, if this is what you want to do, let's figure out a way to do this in a healthy way. Let's consider some options. That's wonderful. What other thoughts do you have? I can't see the chat, so if there are any good comments in the chat that oh, did Kelly leave?
The comments that are coming up is how amazing you are
Oh,
and
okay,
how grateful they are for this presentation. So, but any more questions? I don't see any questions in the Q&A. Let's see.
I've got a comment on this. Ben, this is something that I hear quite a bit. And where I personally go with it is, so yes, there's things that may be toxic about the environment, political parties, different things, the church, whatever is going on here. But those same things kind of exist everywhere. So you can trade problems and move somewhere else, or you can learn how to thrive within and find a healthy way to deal with the toxicity. Disclaimer, I'm not a social worker. That's probably not the right answer, but I don't think leaving one scenario will lead to a fairy tale in the next scenario. I think we're just trading problems and moving around, even if it is worse here than other places. One comparison that I've told a few people is, well, go to Rome. There's a culture there that's different than here, and it's probably the same but different. And so it's not about buying into it. It's not about being a victim of it. It's about finding a way to navigate within it and make it better.
Yeah. Jim, thank you so much for sharing that. Jim is one of my star students. I have all of my students are stars, and he's one of them. And think, you know, what you're saying, Jim, is exactly right. You know, if someone moves, is that going to solve all their problems? And, you know, it does come with a new set of problems. And so the thing you said, Jim, that I really want to highlight is giving someone some kind of like agency here, or giving them some kind of hope. So if this is a toxic environment, if this is where I want to stay, is there something I can do to make the environment better? You know, is there something I can do in my sphere of influence to make this a little better? You know, could I write a letter? Could I do some education? And maybe this person just needs to be mad. You know, maybe they just need to come to therapy and just complain for an hour. You know, that might be the thing that they need that day. But they also need a way to move forward. You know, they're going to need a way to move forward, and it might be the time to do some perspective taking. You know, like it might be the time to say, you know, there are these things that are happening in legislature that feel really painful for you. How about we take a step into their perspective and see and imagine, you know, why they're making that choice. Is this something that might be motivated, you know, not by hate, but maybe by some kind of concern? And that might not be the right time, but it also might be. But what we really want people to have is, you know, we want them to have some insight. You know, we want them to have insight into their experience and the ways that they can move forward in healthy and happy ways. All right. Thank you. All right. We're running out of time. So if you want to know more about me, which you don't have to, you might have had enough time with me and never want to hear from me again. That's great. But if you want to hear more from me, I have this podcast called All Out in the Open that used to be called Questions from the Closet. It's about the intersection of being LGBTQ and a Latter-day Saint. And I also have this book I wrote called A Walk in My Shoes, Questions I'm Often Asked as a Gay Latter-day Saint. And I'm always happy to talk as well. I didn't put my email in here, but it's just ben.schilaty@uvu.edu. And I'm always happy to chat through things and to consult with people. And this has just been a real honor and pleasure for me. Thank you so much for your wonderful comments. And it's been a real pleasure to be with you all. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Ben. This has been amazing. Like I knew it would be, and it was even better. We really appreciate you coming and not only sharing your wealth of knowledge, but also being so open and vulnerable and helping us to truly see, you know, into your heart and the things that you've experienced and learned. And I think that is even more impactful than, you know, just knowledge. Do you know what I mean? Is those experiences, and we really appreciate that.
Wonderful. Thank you, Kelly. And I love attention, so this is great for me.
Well, we're gonna pour attention on you. Just as a reminder, you guys grab that link in the chat that Gabby has been putting in for you so that you can fill out that evaluation and get your CEUs. And I will be getting with you, Ben, to get your slides. If, you know, if that's okay, and we'll send those out with the certificate. People are always asking for the slides, so I'm sure we get that. And thanks again for being here, and hope you guys can join us next month. I know summer's always busy, but hopefully you can be with us, and we'll be excited to see you again. So thank you all.